It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. Matt Hancock says he is profoundly sorry at the COVID inquiry, but is given the cold shoulder by bereaved families.
I am profoundly sorry for the impact that had. I'm profoundly sorry for each death that has occurred.
The Conservative London mayoral hopeful Daniel Korski denies groping a woman during a meeting at Number 10. Reframing the rebellion, Putin praises his troops for averting a civil war and confirms the Wagner Group was heavily funded by the Kremlin. Also tonight, not a game for all. A damning report condemns cricket as racist, sexist and far too elitist.
As a sport, we need to learn from past mistakes and do all we can to make people feel safe and be themselves at every level.
Nicola Bulley's family say they are still receiving online abuse after a coroner finds her death was an accident. Donald Trump is heard discussing a secret official document in a recording which forms part of the case against him.
Declassified. See, as president, I could have declassified. Yeah. Now I can't, but this is classified.
Human remains found in mountains in California are confirmed to be those of the British actor Julian Sands. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's coming up in our press preview from 10:30. Hello there, good evening. Matt Hancock was shunned by bereaved families today as he took his turn at the official COVID inquiry. The former Health Secretary said he was profoundly sorry for the impact caused by COVID, but acknowledged that his apology would be hard to take for some. He was also scathing about the UK's plans to prepare for a pandemic, saying there was far too much focus on how to dispose of the dead rather than save lives. Our health correspondent Ashish Joshi reports.
Matt Hancock would have known his first appearance at the COVID inquiry would be difficult, but not as difficult as for the bereaved families he walked past on his way into the hearing.
The evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
His line of defence was clear from the start. He blamed the system. His fault was to believe what he had been told about the country's readiness.
I was assured that the UK planning was among the best and in some instances the best in the world. The attitude, the doctrine of the UK was to plan for the consequences of a disaster. Can we buy enough body bags? Where are we going to bury the dead? And that was completely wrong.
Why were those practical considerations not followed through?
These recommendations were not there because the system was geared towards how to clear up after a disaster, not prevent it.
From testing to PPE to social care. Every failure was, according to Mr. Hancock, systemic. When Matt Hancock walked through these doors in 2018 as the new Health Secretary, warnings about an emerging pandemic had already been sounded, but he says he inherited a flawed health system, one that was worried about mass casualties and body bags and burial space, not with containing the spread of the virus. But there was more than one attempt at an apology from Mr. Hancock. His written submission, where he said, "There isn't a day that goes by that I do not think about all those who lost their lives to this awful disease." And again in person.
I am profoundly sorry for the impact that had. I'm profoundly sorry for each death that has occurred. And I also understand why, for some, it will be hard to take that apology from me.
But for bereaved widow Lorelei King, the apology means nothing.
I don't accept his apology, and most of the bereaved, well, all of the bereaved I was sitting with won't accept his apology either.
Lorelei's husband, Vincent, died in March 2021 after catching COVID in a care home. the same care home Matt Hancock visited before the pandemic. She was with other bereaved families when Mr. Hancock approached them after he gave evidence.
I felt surprised. It just really confirmed for me the arrogance of the man to think that such an overture would be welcome, because it isn't, and it wasn't, as evidenced by the fact that we all turned our backs on him.
Are you failing to learn the lessons, Mr. Hancock?
Matt Hancock comes back in the autumn when the inquiry turns its focus to his and other senior roles at the heart of the government's pandemic decision-making. Ashish Joshi, Sky News.
Daniel Korski, one of the people in the running to be the Conservative candidate for the Mayor of London, has denied accusations that he groped a woman inside 10 Downing Street. His accuser, the television producer Daisy Goodwin, has tried to make a formal complaint. Mr Korski has also claimed that Conservative officials were aware of the allegations when he launched his campaign. Our political correspondent Maria Aurora has this report.
Claiming to be able to take London in a new direction.
Mr Korski, is it time for you to stand down from the mayoral race? Is Daisy Goodwin a liar, Mr Korski?
Tory Mayor hopeful Daniel Korski's campaign has been rocked by serious allegations of sexual misconduct. In 2013, novelist and screenwriter Daisy Goodwin met Korski at 10 Downing Street, where he was a special advisor to David Cameron, where she claims he sexually assaulted her by putting his hand on her breast. Korski has categorically denied assaulting Goodwin.
I didn't do what's been alleged. I absolutely didn't do that. 10 years ago when it happened, nothing was said to me. 7 years ago when this first came out, nobody alleged anything to me. I just didn't do what's being alleged.
The kind of place where everybody can afford their home and where everybody can walk home safely at night, but especially women.
No official complaint has been made, and Conservative campaign headquarters has said it will not investigate the allegation.
I understand a serious allegation has been made regarding Mr Korski. I also understand a formal complaint hasn't been made, and Mr Korski himself has replied with a personal statement to that allegation earlier today. So Mr Korski has commented on it. Obviously it's a serious issue and it's right that he's commented on it.
But MPs backing Korski are beginning to think twice.
He'd be a brilliant mayor.
Sky News understands Tory MP Robert Halfon has paused his support for Korski to become London mayor. Other candidates won't be drawn on whether Korski ought to drop out of the race altogether.
It's up to him. He is running his campaign. I'm running mine. I desperately want to win. I want to take on Sadiq Khan, and that's the beginning and the end of it.
I can take on and beat Sadiq Khan and restore what I've talked about as the London dream.
His commitment to his campaign remains steadfast, but if Korski continues to lose support from his Conservative backers, these allegations may prove fatal to his chances in the race. Mari Aurora, Sky News, Westminster.
Let's get more now from our political correspondent Liz Bates, who's at Conservative headquarters. So what's likely to happen now, Liz?
Well, this is a story that has progressed very quickly throughout the day. Quite clear, I think, that Daniel Korski is very much trying to cling on to his political career. We've had a number of statements from his spokesman, from him. He did an interview in which he repeatedly said that he denies this allegation in the strongest possible terms. So the question now is either the Conservative Party or Number 10 going to do anything now that this allegation has come to light? Now, both of them saying today that there are processes in place, there are codes of conduct, but no investigation has been launched. And as of this evening, it looks like there probably won't be one. The Conservative Party, and we're outside the headquarters this evening, they were saying this morning, no investigation. What has transpired in that interview with Mr Korski is that they already knew that he was connected to this allegation because he told them himself, and had already chosen to do nothing. Now, what we also know this evening is that Daisy Goodwin has now attempted, because she's told the Times newspaper, to put in a formal complaint to the Cabinet Office in an attempt to trigger a formal investigation. But what we understand is that the Cabinet Office's complaints process probably wouldn't apply to a retrospective complaint of this nature. So really now, the only people that we're looking at in terms of Daniel Korski's future in the mayoral race are his supporters. Well, most of them today have been keeping their heads down, some of them privately concerned that he doesn't have a future in this race, but no public distancing of themselves from Daniel Korski. So today he is defiant, he remains in the race, and the Conservative Party and Number 10 taking no action.
Liz Bates, thank you. To Russia now, where in his third public address in just 24 hours, President Putin thanked troops for preventing what he described as civil war. The leader of Belarus confirmed that the man who'd threatened to march on Moscow, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has finally arrived there. Meanwhile, Ukraine's counteroffensive continues, with signs that territory not held since 2014 is being recaptured. Our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, reports.
With Russia reeling in the wake of its armed mutiny, on the outskirts of Bakhmut, its enemies are trying to take advantage. Ukrainians claim to be pushing back into the city, taken by Russia's Wagner mercenaries, before they turned rogue. Their revolt over the weekend has made Russia's president look weak, the gravest threat yet to his rule. He's trying now to project strength, appearing with his security forces, who failed to foresee and stop the rebellion against him. And he admitted that civil war had been on the cards.
You defended the constitutional order, lives, security and freedom of our citizens, saved our motherland from upheavals and effectively stopped a civil war.
Later, he took ownership of Wagner with this account of its support from his government.
The government has fully funded the Wagner Group. While the Wagner Group allowance was on the government's shoulders, Concord's owner earned 80 billion rubles over the year through Voyentog by providing food and catering services to the military.
Still no sign of the man who took all that money. After calling off his uprising, Wagner's mutinous leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has now arrived in Belarus. The question now, can his fighters who took control of at least 2 major Russian cities over the weekend now join him? Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko has also been in front of the cameras after brokering the deal that defused the mutiny. It was perhaps a sign of Putin's waning power that even a man regarded as his puppet seemed to be criticising him.
A cruel decision was made to eliminate Prigozhin. It sounded that way between the lines of Putin's speech. I suggested to Putin not to rush.
Meanwhile, Putin's enemies are claiming advances on the field of battle. Their forces' counter-offensive apparently picking up steam. Analysts say Ukraine is making some progress.
The Ukrainians are reclaiming some territories, in some cases those that they lost in 2014. And although these are not big areas, these are actually big psychological gains, because it shows that the Ukrainians are serious in saying we want all of our territory back. They've got a long way to go yet, but getting some of it back gives them heart and will not go down very well in Moscow.
They are so far only modest advances against the Russian invader. But the more successful the Ukrainian counter-offensive, the more acute Vladimir Putin's pain. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News, Kyiv, Ukraine.
NHS consultants have voted to go on strike on July the 20th and 21st in a dispute over pay. But a ballot of the Royal College of Nurses in England has decided not to continue industrial action after the union did not meet the required number of votes to enable further action. Police in California, Southern California, have confirmed that remains found at the weekend were those of the British actor Julian Sands, but the cause of death isn't yet known. He'd been missing since January when he failed to return from a hike. Sands had roles in films including A Room with a View, The Killing Fields and The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. He was 65. And Lewis Capaldi has announced he is taking a break from touring for the foreseeable future. It comes after he struggled to finish his performance at Glastonbury. He says he's still learning to adjust to the impact of his Tourette's and needs time to focus on his physical and mental health. The family of Nicola Bulley have hit out at speculation on social media following her death, as an inquest finds she drowned accidentally. Family members said she'd been looking forward to the future and had overcome difficulties with alcohol and anxiety. Martin Brunt reports.
After all the wild speculation and conspiracy theories, the coroner ruled that Nicola Bulley's death was an accident. She tumbled into the river, probably down this steep bank, and drowned. It wasn't a crime, it wasn't suicide, said the coroner, but exactly why she fell in is still a mystery. Nicola's body was recovered from the water at St Michael's-on-Wyre 3 weeks later. After the verdict, a solicitor spoke for Nicola's family.
Whilst we'll never forget the loss of our Nikki, we will forever remember her as the brilliant mum, partner, daughter and sister that we all knew and loved so very much. It's upsetting that we've continued to receive negative targeted messages and still widely inaccurate speculation being shared on numerous platforms.
The coroner had been so worried about disruption to the inquest that police patrolled around the building. He said there had been threats of protests inside and out. The inquest heard that Nicola had struggled with the effects of the menopause, had alcohol issues and suffered from anxiety. Her sister Louise said she was so worried she'd called a mental health emergency team 2 weeks before Nicola vanished. It worked as a wake-up call. Nicola stopped drinking. Nicola's partner, Paul Ansell, told the coroner she had recently turned her life around. He said the blip over the Christmas period happened, but in January she was back to herself, looking forward to the future, and everything was on the up. We were good together. I offered her spontaneity, and she was the planner. She was an incredible mum. The coroner was told that at the time she vanished, Nicola was excited by her work prospects. She was planning a spa day and arranging a play date for her daughter. Nobody who saw her that morning thought there was anything wrong with her. Nicola's family said they took comfort in messages from strangers around the world. One day they said Nicola's 2 daughters will read the many cards filled with such kindness and love. Martin Brunt, Sky News, Preston.
Now, tomorrow, England will set foot on the hallowed turf of Lords for the start of the second Ashes test. But today, Captain Ben Stokes apologised after a damning report found racism and sexism widespread in the sport. The Independent Commission for Equity in Cricket says deep-rooted class barriers are making the sport elitist and exclusionary and called for urgent reform. Our sports correspondent Rob Harris has this report.
Away from the grandeur of Lords, this is where cricket is already producing solutions. On a pitch in Stourbridge, a pathway being provided into the professional game for British Asian players in a system found to be rife with inequalities and discrimination. Players who are questioning why their opportunities with county sides prove so short-lived.
I think when you're young and you're growing up from when you're 10 to wherever, when you're playing age group cricket, you don't really bat an eyelid at it. That's kind of what you're brought up with, and you think that's just another one of those things. But I think the older you get, you kind of slowly start to realise that's not okay.
Before playing today, they were all digesting the Cricket Commission report that's documented a deep-rooted racist, sexist and elitist culture in their sport. It's gone unchallenged too often and can be hard to challenge.
It's hard to bullet point what's the reasons why people don't get opportunities, but there's always underlying factors where before people were like, nah, it probably doesn't exist, but after the reports that have come out, they clearly do. We've got the greatest series going on in the Ashes, and it was just very unfortunate the timing of this statement have come out now when the second test starts tomorrow.
But England, led by Captain Ben Stokes, are committing to helping cricket become more inclusive.
To the people involved in the game who have been made to feel unwelcome or unaccepted in the past, I'm deeply sorry to hear of your experiences. Cricket is a game that needs to celebrate diversity on all fronts, because without diversity, this game would not be where it is at today.
All while levelling gender pay disparities too. England's women can earn a fifth of their male counterparts, a pay gap the Commission wants closing.
Some of those structural issues we were surprised to hear about, including the disparities in the way in which women are treated, the lack of investment in the game, albeit it's improved, but still a lack of investment, women seen as second-class citizens.
England being crazy about cricket, there's a mad rush of youngsters to Lord's to see Oxford and Cambridge play their annual match.
The Commission wants an end to elitist advantages like this. Long-standing annual games at Lord's between Eton and Harrow, and Oxford and Cambridge.
Some of the schools in England, it's difficult for them to play cricket because they are inner city schools, they haven't got the space and all that. The game has got to be inclusive, but not just putting the word inclusive. People have got to feel that they are welcome in the game.
It's places like here that provide the solution to cricket's diversity problem. The Commission found that players might have the talent, but they often fall out of the professional game. The South Asian Cricket Academy is providing a way back in, with a platform for players to showcase their skills against county second 11s. They won't be put off by entrenched discrimination, faced by more than 80% of Commission respondents of Asian heritage. Eradicating the hate and levelling the playing field could take years, with English cricket needing a reset after its racism reckoning. Rob Harris, Sky News, Stourbridge.
Donald Trump has been heard rifling through papers and admitting that he had not declassified a highly confidential document found at his Florida home. A recording has emerged which appears to show Trump discussing a plan to attack Iran and threatens to undermine the former president's defence against the criminal charges he faces. Here's our US correspondent James Matthews.
Another day, another speech, another attack on his accusers.
I said, wait a minute, I'm a candidate. You're arresting a candidate? Yeah, because you're leading. That's why we're arresting. If you were losing or if you weren't a candidate, we'd have no problem.
It was as close as Donald Trump came to addressing his Miami court case after the emergence of an audio tape. It contains private remarks that go to the heart of his prosecution on the mishandling of sensitive documents seized from his Florida home.
He said he wanted to attack Iran and what? These are the papers. This was done by the military, given to me.
This is audio of Trump speaking about an apparent US government plan to attack Iran. He was in conversation at his Bedminster golf course with two staff members, a writer and a publisher, each with questions over their security clearance. On tape, you hear the sound of shuffling papers.
We'll have to see. Yeah,
Significantly, Trump seems to acknowledge he's in possession of classified material that he couldn't declassify.
Declassified.
Yeah.
See, as president, I could have declassified it. Now I can't, but this is classified.
Now we have a problem.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Trump has dismissed the material relating to Iran as the contents of newspapers and magazines. His prosecutors would beg to differ. They might well contend that they have, on audio tape, a recording of a criminal and his crime. James Matthews, Sky News, in Washington.
Well, let's just bring you some breaking news now. And Darren Hall, who is 36, has been charged with the murder of Sarah Henshaw, whose body was found in a lay-by near the M1 on Monday. That is according to Derbyshire Constabulary. She was 31 years old, last seen at her home in Ilkeston on the 20th of June. Now, England have begun their training camp ahead of next month's Women's World Cup, with the tournament being held in Australia and a number of key players missing through injury. The Lionesses face a tougher prospect than last year's home turf victory in the Euros. Before they fly down under next week, Becky Johnson went to meet the team.
As they prepare to head out to the World Cup, these are the players who'll carry the hopes of a nation with them. If the Lionesses can go all the way, it'll be the first time England have won the World Cup since 1966. So as the players faced the press, there was one big question. Can you bring the World Cup home?
We're going to make sure we're the best prepared we possibly can be going into this tournament. It's, the biggest stage in football. and there's, you're playing against the world's top team, so it's definitely going to be a challenge. But like I said, all we can do is make sure we're the best prepared and we go out there and play our hearts out as always.
It does feel that if any team can do it, they can. Raising the trophy as European champions last summer, they won the support and respect of the nation. They go into the World Cup among the favourites, having come close before, but have faced setbacks with injuries ruling out some of the stars. Captain Leah Williamson, Beth Mead and Fran Kirby.
Of course, we do have some great players out of the squad, but we also have some great players in the squad, and I think it gives opportunities to others to step up and show what they can do as well. So I think we try and focus on what we do have here, and the depth that we have in the squad is incredible.
Many of the Lionesses became household names last summer, and since then the profile of the women's game has undoubtedly risen. But they go into the World Cup with women's pay still falling far behind men's.
It's going to take a long time. The fight will keep happening. We'll keep fighting like the pioneers before us did to even enable me to stand in this position right now.
Like England's men back in '66, the win last year was on home turf at Wembley.
It's great what we did for women in sport last year, and women's football, of course, and it's about making those memories again.
They'll head off to Australia and New Zealand, knowing no England football team has ever won a major championship abroad. But these Lionesses have taught us to dare to dream. Becky Johnson, Sky News at St George's Park.